Okay, I'd like to call this licensing committee meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. My name's Bob Gale. I'm the police board chair as well as chair of the board's licensing committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to the police service meeting for the vehicles for hire industry. I know there's other people from the towing and that here too. We'll allow you all to talk, but I also have to manage time. Okay, the speakers aren't working at the back. Is this any better? Okay, I'll try and talk loud into it, but okay, so my name is Bob Gale. I'm the police board chair, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Police Service Board's public licensing meeting for the vehicles for hire industry. And like I said, I know there's some towing people here. We'll allow anybody to talk that wants to on this, so we're not here. Wow. Now I'll move it back. So we'll find a happy medium here somehow. The purpose of today's meeting is to hear submissions from the industry and consider any proposed amendments to the licensing bylaw. It's important to mention that no decisions will be made today on any issues raised. We'll have other meetings down the way to make decisions. However, the committee is scheduled to meet on December 7th to consider the comments and submissions heard today. And I anticipate that a final recommendation will be made to the full board at a later date. I'd also like to remind the participants that all submissions are limited to 10 minutes. Now, we have 5 set for 10 minutes at the start. Depending on how many people are talking later, I might have to cut that back a bit. And I'm going to say at the time that if you're just endorsing the person in front of you, please be courteous. And I don't mind you coming up here and saying I endorse that person, but I don't need to hear the whole thing again. It's just common sense I'm working with here, please. At this time, I'd like to introduce the head table. I have member Terry Bonham, member Dave Barrick, also a regional councillor, Deb Reed, our CAO of the police board, myself, Ken Ganzel, vice chair of the board, Vaughn Stewart, a member of the board, and Woody McKeag, the board solicitor. The board solicitor, Woody McKeag, board executive director, Deb Reed, and the officer in charge of the license unit, Detective Sergeant Craig LeBon, straight in front of me, are also in attendance. The topics of discussion. I'd like now to turn to Woody McKeag and Detective Sergeant Craig LeBon to provide an overview of the various topics for discussion. Woody, if you would like to start, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is the annual meeting. We do this every year, and the purpose is to hear input from the various industries as to issues that are of concern to you. And this year we have also developed some issues that we want, the board feels, or the committee feels that we'll have to address for the coming year. Those are, I'm sure each of you or most of you have picked up the agenda. Those issues are set out in the, under paragraph 3, topics of discussion. A couple of them, specifically number 2, region-wide use of taxi licenses and quotas. The region-wide use of taxis was changed. That was allowed in the summer of 2016. It was intended to be a one-year trial, so this is a little longer than a year. But that's why this is back on the table to discuss. We heard submissions from the industry, and I think it was in July of 2016, and we are interested to know how that is working. We've heard from the licensing unit. We need to hear from the industry. As the chair said, I want to emphasize no decision has been made by the board on any of these things. These are just topics for discussion. That happens every year, and what the board does is they want to hear from the industry, and they can't give you everything you want, obviously, but what they're going to do is consider all the submissions that are made. I don't really have anything to add on top of that. Craig, do you have anything to add to it, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, the solicitor has expressed the content of the meeting quite well.
Okay,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, there's 5 presenters who have filed submissions. Do you want to call them? Do you want me to? It doesn't matter. You can. We just go through them in order, I guess. Okay.
Okay, like Woody just said, there's 5 submissions that have applied to us in advance for talks, and that they'll be limited to 10 minutes, but then there could be questions afterwards. I'll allow police board members as well as staff to ask questions on this. And I'm asking you to show some respect for everybody here. I understand there's people here that are different parts contrary to what somebody else might be speaking about. But please keep it down. I know I've said enough on that, so we'll just move on from here. The first speaker, please, would be Richard Mell. Mr. Richard Mell? Oh, okay. You're representing him? Yeah. Okay, please, Diane, come on up and press the button, the red light will come on. Say your name and what company you're from, please, and then go ahead. Thank you.
Is that better? Yeah. Okay, I'm Diane from Grape Escape Wine Tours, based in Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Diane, what's your last name, please?
Shaw. Theatre, Shaw. I've just got 4 points, actually. There's quite a few new startup companies in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and we've noticed they're not being licensed, or they don't have licenses. That's the first point that I wanted to bring up. Second point is the existing tour operators have vehicles without sightseeing plates. I don't know if that's a must, they have to have them.
We'll get a response to every question you ask from staff and that, but go ahead.
Oh, you want me to wait, or do you want me to give you all the questions?
You go on with your whole talk, and then I'm asking them to write down the questions you're asking and respond to them. Thank you.
And also, drivers of the sightseeing vehicles, there's a lot of them without the license that they need, a sightseeing operator. And is it possible to share details of the companies that have all the legal plates and everything with each other? In other words, like we have 5 vehicles and they're all licensed, and all the operators, all the guides are licensed. Would it be possible to work with the companies and sort of say, right, we have 5, all licensed, all green plates, how about you? And then if we see them out there, and there are a lot of people out there that don't have licenses. We're finding B&B people are taking people out. It's not legal. It's not correct. So, you know, we are keeping within the law, but there's quite a few people out there that aren't. Okay.
Okay, in this case here, I normally would go to the police board first, but I'm going to ask staff to answer your questions, whatever they can. Whatever they can't answer you, I guarantee you they'll get an answer back to you after this at a time. If not, come back to me, please, or come back to our board, because we make mistakes too. Okay. The thing is, after the staff responds to your questions, and make sure everyone's addressed, please, we'll ask the police board to ask any questions they have as well. Okay. Detective LeBon.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe my staff has already worked on the first 4. I'm going to have Detective Lindsay answer the first 4, because I believe he's actually working with your owner on those already.
Yeah,
that's my understanding.
Of the owners.
Okay, so I'll have him answer, and maybe you can, if you have any further questions. The last question about sharing details, I'm going to ask for input from Mr. McCaig, of course, but my understanding is, as long as all the owners give their consent, we can share that. But I'd like to defer to Mr. McCaig for the legal opinion.
Well, there are privacy issues. The problem with getting consent from everybody is, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying, Diane, is that there's some businesses that are operating and they're not licensed.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're not going to give us their consent. So those, they come into enforcement issues. If I understand your last point, really you want the licensed industry to assist in enforcement. That's really what you're getting at, is it?
Yeah, that's what we're getting at. And if we see the vehicles that aren't licensed properly, then obviously we take a picture and we send it to you guys, and then you sort it out best you can. We're happy to do that.
But isn't that, I mean, you're going to do that anyway, right? And you are doing it now.
We have done it, yes.
Yeah. It's kind of, I don't know whether it's cart before the horse or not, but if you're saying to us, we want you to tell us, or we want us to tell the industry who is and isn't licensed, you know, we don't know who isn't licensed until we find out that they're operating without a license. So I'm not sure that that's really a place where we want to go. But I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, because it's going to help in enforcement. And as everybody in this room knows, we don't license just for the sake of licensing. We license for public safety issues, to make sure the vehicles are safe, the vehicles are properly insured, and the drivers who are operating them don't present a danger to the public. And so any assistance you can give, I'm sure, is welcomed by Craig and his staff.
Yeah, that would be great. It's like I've said before, it's quite simple, because we know where they are. and we can't do anything, and obviously it causes a fair bit of bad feeling. If I get out the car and take a picture, they've got quite annoyed, and I said, well, you're not legal. You know, we are legal now. So we feel quite strict about it. It's people, it's bodies. You know, if they have an accident or something, it's just they're not licensed to carry bodies.
Through you, Mr. Chair. One thing, and I'm going to let Detective Lindsay take over with respect to, he's already been working, I believe, with your company. So, but one thing I would like to make clear, I don't want you or your staff putting yourselves in any danger. Okay, if you can give us information, that's wonderful. But I want to make that very clear. I do not want you to get into any kind of a confrontation with anybody else. We want you to be safe. We want everybody to be safe, and we're more than willing to follow up on any complaints. Okay. So if I can pass it over to Detective Lindsay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Dan, I think the best course of action might be, I spoke to Rich yesterday with respect to some of these issues, and just to, with respect to, for sake of time, if you and I could have a conversation. I think one of the issues was he thought I had moved on and he didn't have a contact person to get a hold of. But now, having seen him yesterday and addressed the top three, the fourth one, of course, I have no jurisdiction over, we should be able to rectify any issues you might have.
Right.
That's okay with you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any members of the police board have a question? There's none. Diane, so they're talking to you now. If you don't get all the answers you want, see, the police board represents the community. Yeah. We're right in between the service and the community, for lack of better words. So if you aren't getting the answers in a proper time, email us, email Detective LeBon or whatever. But we want answers to all your questions. So I'm asking you to come back at us if you're not getting answers to your questions. Okay. I'm not saying they won't, but we all make mistakes. So, okay? Yeah. You're good? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one I'd like up is Chris Schaefer from Uber Canada, please. Sure, he has a plug-in.
For the presentation? Oh. I don't think it's. Oh, it's even if I just open the laptop, I can just stick it in and. I don't think so. Okay. There's a whole process of security. Okay.
Sorry, Chris. I mean, I can put you at the end of the agenda if you want and see if we can do something. But
I can run it. I can just view it from here and speak to it.
Okay. So thank you.
1 second. I'll pull it up so I can at least refer to it myself.
Okay, so we know you're Chris Schaefer from Uber, so we're good for you. Don't have to identify yourself. You've been up a few times, so sure. Thank you.
And thank you, Chair and Board, for the opportunity to present today again. I'll speak briefly to some of the issues that are on your agenda today. So some of this I'll just quickly highlight again for the board here today. Uber has a track record of compliance. We are regulated now in well over a dozen cities in Ontario alone, all the major cities that you're familiar with, and comments repeatedly from regulators in cities like Ottawa and Toronto are that overall compliance by Uber as the private transportation company is high. Uber is complying. And of course, the result of that is a number of partnerships we now have with municipalities like Innisfil, Metrolinx, and other corporate partners. Uber in the Niagara region, initial bylaw development and implementation has of course been labor intensive and costly. We understand that. Some of those costs, no doubt, are probably startup costs initially with getting and regulating and licensing a new service. So we understand that. We believe we've worked with the licensing unit to attempt to reduce those costs through a number of different means over the last year and a bit. With constant meeting and feedback, addressing concerns and ways to try to reduce that labor necessary to license and regulate. We've accommodated various licensing unit requests over time. second decal, other administrative processes we've worked with the licensing unit on together. I won't outline them, they're in my submission today. And we will continue to do that in addition to that meeting we had with the licensing unit after our last time before the board, looking at some possible tech-based solutions to make the process of licensing here in the region more efficient. The licensing unit, as you know, has proposed some amendments to the current process of licensing Uber drivers. The proposal, in our opinion, from the licensing unit does not recognize the ride-sharing business model reality, and that is the majority of Uber drivers drive 5 to 10 hours a week. This is unworkable, and the proposal by the licensing unit is unworkable for the ride-sharing industry in terms of having people come down to City Hall when they have full-time employment, part-time employment, doing other things. The proposal, we think, from the licensing unit, with all due respect, of course, would create new additional work. The licensing unit would have to handle prospective T&C drivers with incomplete applications. Of course, now we don't send incomplete applications to the licensing unit, but presumably if they were handling it all instead of the T&C Uber, which handles it all now, there would be drivers here possibly with incomplete licenses. The licensing unit would also have to communicate, document, and license renewals to T&C drivers. Again, something that's handled currently by the T&C or Uber, if you like. The proposal, I think, by the licensing unit could lead to appeals. Right now, Uber, the T&C, is the main communication vehicle between the T&C and the driver, and there aren't appeals even though that process exists in the current bylaw. We are effectively the agent for drivers. If that process moves to the region, I think there's a possibility that drivers may seek to avail themselves of the appeal process and, again, create more work for the region that they don't currently have to do. The proposal, we also think, from the licensing unit would create possible public safety issues. The licensing unit having to ensure drivers maintain up-to-date records and communicate lapses to us, whereas right now we handle all of that. If a driver's license expires, we temporarily suspend the driver's access to the platform. If that is all being handled by the licensing unit, they'd have to communicate that to us. That could lead to delays, miscommunication, and challenges there that I think would, again, with all due respect, increase the workload, not decrease the workload of the licensing unit. The licensing unit's proposal is aimed, as they suggest, to lower the workload and reduce that workload, make it more efficient. I think their proposal actually does the opposite. It's why we've proposed an audit-based model. I spoke to this last time. It's in my submission as well. That proposal is similar to what other cities are doing: Ottawa, Oakville, Hamilton, Waterloo, etc. Basically, again, the process would work is that we collect, retain, and remit data related to drivers and vehicles to ensure compliance with the bylaw, rather than staff having to do all the work they do. What happens in other cities is that basically we collect all that information, share the data with the city, and the city will audit us on a whatever basis, cadence they choose. Could be monthly, could be quarterly, and because the T&C is licensed, they ensure compliance with the bylaw through a process of auditing plus spot checks where they can take trips on the Uber platform and ensure compliance that way. We think this audit-based model, given our experience in other cities, would reduce the workload here. We also think possibly the tech-based solution from our last meeting with the licensing unit, Mr. Chris Bell, I believe, that tech solution, if implemented, would allow for further efficiencies in terms of the process that I'm proposing here with respect to the audit-based model. The criminal background check is another issue on the agenda. I've touched base with Cobourg Police and also the National Association of Professional Background Screeners. It is their understanding that Bill 113 has had no impact on their current process for the way in which we conduct our background checks. It's done through the Cobourg Police Service that tap identical databases nationwide. It's also their understanding that because the RCMP grants permissions to police services across Canada for the databases that they're allowed to tap, that the databases being tapped by Coburg would be no different. They'd have no less access to any other databases that the police service here would have access to. And as a reminder, the process that all the cities in Ontario are using under bylaws is exactly the process I'm talking about. Right now, the Niagara region duplicates that. The Coburg Police Service runs background checks on all our prospective drivers. The result is zero tolerance. If they have a criminal background, they don't drive for Uber. If they are clear, they pass that. We pass them on to the police service here. They rerun that background check. No city does that. Guelph Region Police Services Board used to do that. They've passed that authority now to the city of Guelph. So Guelph is not rerunning background checks. They don't have the police service running background checks. Niagara Region, frankly, is the only jurisdiction that I know that Uber operates that is rerunning background checks through a police service. It just doesn't happen anywhere else. The other item, and I'm coming up here, I'm timing myself, I'm at 7:45, so I will stop before 10. The licensing fee proposal here before you. Look, bottom line is we want to be amenable, we're cooperative, we're doing all we can to make this work. I personally think the proposal to go from the top graduated tier of 7,500 to 50,000 is a big increase potentially from 1 year over a year. We do recognize there are costs to licensing this new service in the region. I happen to think the audit-based model we're talking about, which would require very few amendment to the existing bylaw, if adopted, plus possibly the tech-based solution that Mr. Bell, the unit here has proposed or will propose to the board potentially, that coupled with possibly not rerunning a duplicative background check, we think would significantly save the region or reduce the workload and reduce the licensing related costs. So that keeps sliding down, my apologies. There's a proposal before you from us that I think would save the region licensing fees. And so I would ask that that be considered. But again, we want to be cooperative players here in that process and make sure the costs of regulatory compliance are covered. In terms of the quarterly fee proposal, again, just the increase from 7,500 to 50,000, if that was adopted, again, that's a big increase, and we might want to consider phasing something smaller in first and see how well that can be done with some of the additional reforms I've suggested here and see if we can offset some of those costs. The $15 fee on top of the 50,000 fee, you're looking at significant cost increases. The 50,000 jump from 7,500 to 50,000 annually, that's an increase of about $65,000 annually to the police service, just with that measure alone, not including the $15 per quarter as proposed by the licensing unit. I'm at my limit now. I've got my submission before you. I thank you for your time, and I welcome, of course, any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. What I'm going to do for the rest of the submissions is I'm going to go to Woody next, and then staff. We are here as a police board to listen, not to say we won't ask questions, but I think there could be more structure in the questions from Woody and from staff if they have any. So Woody, do you have any questions of Chris?
No, I've read the material, and I understand their point, Chris's point, and I have nothing to ask him about.
Craig, do you or your staff have any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, we have a few. I think some of them will be reserved for the private meeting, the confidential meeting. However, I think some of the topics should be addressed so that the board has all the information that is required. Mr. Schaefer, your first point was about incomplete. You never submit incomplete applications. However, we have some very recent examples actually, and I'll ask my staff member Erica Golding to give a couple of very pertinent examples. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica for this portion.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I've actually processed one today that it was missing some documentation. And when I asked the driver, he said he never submitted it. So I processed the last 253 applicants, 46 have been denied. 27 of them is because there's a vehicle issue, whether the vehicles have not been plated, there's safety issues, or just vehicle issues. 15 is because of photo. We have guidelines, no hats, sunglasses. People send sunglasses, hats, so we can't see their face. 4 of them were suspended drivers, and 2 of them because of background issues. So your system isn't complete that way?
You're welcome to respond
Yeah.
if you wish.
I didn't know if you were done. Through you, Chair, thank you for the question. So to my knowledge, again, the background checks done through Coburg, we get a yes, there's a criminal history, they don't drive, they don't pass that portion of the test. If it's a no, they've clear, there's no criminal history, we would then they would pass through that stage of the process. Vehicle required is a annual safety standard certificate. Again, that's mandatory as per the bylaw. So drivers would have to have that as part of the application package. Motor vehicle reference check. All of those things, photos, et cetera, that you've mentioned, would be packaged together and then sent, as you know, through the process we've structured for that transmission of that data to the region. My understanding is that all of those documents would be in order and provided to the region.
So through you, Mr. Chair, but that's what we're saying. Unfortunately, it's not perfect, and we have some examples of where there's been some failure from the submissions that we received from Uber. So all we're saying is it's not a better process from our experience so far. That's with respect to the document renewals. We're also set up to receive that. And our system is already set up to receive that seamlessly, so there's no issues from our standpoint. Some of the recommendations we did make to staff, to the board, was that if we license the drivers individually, the renewal date would apply to the date that they were licensed, and it wouldn't be a group renewal, which would actually make the process a lot more streamlined. You mentioned the public safety issues, DL expiry. Right now, the system is, if we come across anything, we notify you immediately. And I don't see how that could get any quicker from your standpoint. And the last thing that I would like to address before turning it over to Gary is you were talking about the audit-based model and how well it works in Ottawa. I just spoke to Ottawa today. With respect to the costs, Ottawa have one full-time employee working simply on auditing that system, and they have 4 full-time field enforcement personnel. All of these positions have been created since the TNC portfolio has commenced in Ottawa. They are all temporary positions, however, they are all full-time positions that have been created since Uber has began operating there. So they're even with the audit-based model, there are other costs due to that. And with respect to the criminal background checks, I will turn it over to Mr. Holden.
Excuse me, Gary, I'm just going to interrupt. One thing, I want all the facts out here. We're not going to allow this to be a debate, and it's not, don't get me wrong. But I want to make sure that all the facts are out, and understand, everybody in the audience too, that we're right in between here. We don't take sides of service or sides of the presenter in that, so we have to read between the lines on some things possibly. And I'm just saying that so you don't think that we're just taking the side and going to crush anybody up there talking, or it's going to go the other way around, because we will stop that real quick. So I just want everything out. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. I've got a few points of clarification in your document. I've got a hard copy in front of me on page 3, in the second bullet going down. You indicate that Coburg Police Service has the same access to information as the Niagara Regional Police Service. I just wanted to clarify that they don't have the same access because we have a local database that they don't have full access to. So every police service in the province has their own local RMS, a records management system. Many police services publish some of the information to PIP, the police information portal you referred to, but certainly not all of it. So the downfall of relying on Coburg is they may only see 40%, 50%, 60, or even up to 80, but that's still not 100%. So that's a risk the region has taken on if the assumption is made that Coburg can see everything any local jurisdiction may be able to see.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. So what I indicate there is that of those databases, Coburg would have, the databases listed in my submission, Coburg would have the same access to those databases. And what's also important, I think, to point out is that every other city, so if we look at like Toronto, Town of Oakville, Mississauga, Waterloo region, the list can go on in terms of cities that have passed bylaws to regulate ride sharing. All of them are following the process as I've outlined. The Cobourg police service that taps the databases I've listed in my submission. All of them are comfortable with that background check process. And what I'm suggesting is that the region here might find some comfort in knowing that every other city that's regulated ride sharing in Ontario to date is following the process I've outlined. And so Cobourg, again, recall, there is a background check done before the driver ever gets to the region. There's a background check done that every other city that's regulated ride sharing in Ontario is comfortable with. Here, when we get to the region, it's rerun again with some access to some local information that may not be in the PIP database because it hasn't been uploaded to the PIP database. That is, I take you at your word for that. But I will stress that every other city is comfortable with the process I've outlined that isn't rerunning a background check through a police service.
Just to go on, and not to keep it going back and forth, but I can confirm the police services, they are not in compliance with that, and they're not happy. That's why they don't have the sharing agreements with Uber. Most of the jurisdictions, they do it through the city bylaw. It's not through the police department, so they're not comfortable with that, just so we're not putting words into their mouth. Also, your document states the RCMP mandates what data can be searched by police services. I just wanted to clarify that that's not true. In fact, the RCMP are only stewards of the CPIC database, the national database. We have intelligence databases and our own local RMS databases and everything else, and it's incumbent on the local jurisdiction to determine what gets released there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, all I indicate in my submission is that the National Association's understanding is what I indicated in the report. The National Association of Background Screeners, that is their understanding, and that's what I iterate in my report.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, that agency is a third-party agency that isn't representative of the police services or the police service boards, something that we wouldn't recognize as an authority, just to clarify that.
Through you, Chair, it is a third-party organization, correct?
I just wanted to draw to your attention on page 7, Chris, you've got the criminal background checks. Uber's threshold for criminal convictions currently is a zero-tolerance threshold. I just want to bring to your attention that under the Human Rights Code, everybody has a right to employment regardless of a police records check. So just for your own issue, that just to make sure that if they have a criminal conviction or any police record, that it's deemed relevant first before you turn them away.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't retain drivers as employees. They're independent contractors, and the refusal for them to move through the process to become an Uber driver from prospective to current, if there is a criminal conviction, that we're not talking about a pardon, I'm talking about a criminal conviction that is not pardoned. Our policy, despite what a bylaw, you have to understand, city bylaws often provide thresholds where individuals with certain criminal histories can drive certain vehicles for hire. So often it is the case in the taxi industry in different cities in Ontario where a driver may have a criminal conviction for certain crimes that would permit them to drive. And those, like, for example, the City of Toronto bylaw, we could permit drivers with criminal histories, as per the language in the Toronto bylaw, to drive a vehicle for hire with Uber. That's the bylaw. Our personal policy is, I would argue, it supersedes that in the sense that it goes further than what the bylaw requires. Often bylaws give some threshold that's not zero tolerance. Our personal policy is we meet the bylaw, then we go above that and just don't permit drivers with a criminal history.
Thank you, Chris. And one last question, just going to your comment on page 8, that you do not require a vulnerable sector check in some cases. They recognize that unless a TNC driver is specifically dedicated to regularly driving unaccompanied children, disabled individuals, the elderly, or other particularly vulnerable groups, he or she would not meet the threshold. So the comment indicates that because they're not doing it all the time, that you do not mandate that a VS, a vulnerable sector search, be conducted. It is the position of the Niagara Regional Police that it doesn't matter whether it's 1 time or 2,000 times, if it involves the vulnerable sector, our risk liability mandates that a VS check be done. I can indicate that Cobourg is not able to do a VS check for you, so potentially there's valuable information in there that you're not going to be made aware of.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. The Niagara Region bylaw doesn't require a vulnerable sector check. So we're in compliance with the bylaw currently. The bylaw requires a criminal background check. What I indicate there is actually the legal opinion espoused publicly by the Canadian Civil Liberties Association that has articulated time and time again a very solid position, I would argue, against requiring a vulnerable sector check writ large against everybody and under every circumstance. Their position legally as a liberty and rights related organization with rather esteemed record over the decades is one against that. I'm happy to provide you their written legal opinion on the subject. It happens to be the one that I share. But either way, the bylaw here doesn't require one, so it's actually not material, I would argue.
Just a real quick response and to keep it short. We get the Niagara Regional Police, we have other bylaws other than to the bylaw office, but we are mandated to do background checks in accordance with Bill 113 and the OACP document, and it does require a vulnerable sector check. Bill 113 stipulates quite unequivocally it has to be consistent right across the board. There's only one way to do background checks, regardless of who it's for.
Okay, I'd like to move on from that point now, if we can. Do you have any more, Gary? Or no? Is there any other questions from staff?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to open up to my staff members who are actually the ones who deal on a day-to-day basis with the Uber portfolio, if you don't mind. It'll be brief.
Yep.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So they deal with Ottawa, who require a vulnerable sector check. So those drivers have to go to the Ottawa police station, get their check, and that's submitted with their downloads, correct? Because I've talked to the issuer manager there in Ottawa as well. And so when we get our files, for example, I did our last a couple weeks in October. So in October 3rd, we had 40 submissions through Uber. So 17 of those were Niagara applications, which is 42.5%, and 23 were out-of-town applications, which is 57.5%. And these are in regions such as Mississauga, Brampton, Etobicoke, Hamilton, Cambridge, Barrie, North York, Stouffville.
Excuse me 1 second. Are you going? I need a question of him for this. Otherwise, we'll get this information on December 7th. If you have a question for him, then that's fine. But I just don't want information coming to us unless he is required to challenge it right now. So
through Ottawa, when they get their submissions, you have a photograph, your driver's license, your ownership, and then your safety. And then they also have an additional piece, which is their vulnerable sector check, which the drivers obtained through the Ottawa Police Service. And we don't have that in ours right now. And I think if they are coming in anyway to the police service to get those checks done, we could do that a lot more efficiently with having somebody who mans the desk. Because a man desk is done during our service hours. Otherwise, it's just me doing these admin things.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So Ottawa's bylaw is correct, does require a vulnerable sector check. It's one of the few bylaws in Ontario that require that. It used to require a prospective driver to go in person to a police station. It no longer does. It can be done exclusively online. And that is a change recently initiated by the police service there in Ottawa. And again, most bylaws, a overwhelming majority of bylaws do not require a vulnerable sector check in Ontario. Ottawa is an exception to the rule, and that is accurate. And then the last part, in terms of drivers coming in, again, no city that has regulated ride sharing in the province of Ontario requires drivers to come into a government office, be it City Hall or the police service here. And the reason being is the model itself doesn't work. For someone that the majority drive 5 to 10 hours a week, to take time off work to come into City Hall or a police service office, when all of that can be done quite efficiently and effectively as it is being done under bylaws across Ontario, where the information is collected and retained by Uber and submitted to the city for licensing and compliance-based purposes, even where cities like Ottawa, if we want to use Ottawa as an example, has a staff report out today that indicates, again, I'll use their language that they use with me on the phone, very high degree in the top 90th percentile of compliance by Uber. And the same goes for cities and staff reports published to date across the province of Ontario. I don't understand why the challenge rests here despite best effort in making the process as efficient as possible. We've worked very hard to do that here, and I think folks in the licensing unit too have proposed proposals on the tech side that can vastly improve the efficiency here. Again, we want to be partners in that process, and it's been our desire from day one to continue to work together to find a way that recognizes the realities of the business model and what other cities have done, and say, okay, can we work together as best we can to bring that process into Niagara and actually be more productive and efficient for the service here, and ideally save some money for the police board doing so.
You're good? Okay, thank you. What did you have a comment?
Just on the Ottawa issue, so Ottawa requires a vulnerable sector check for each driver.
Through Mr. Chair, correct. It's one of the few cities that does.
What are the mechanics of how they would get it then if they're not going to the police station? Gary, can you
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only way they could get it is through a police station. Only a Category 1 police agency can do a VS check, no other third-party agency. I'm not familiar directly with Ottawa's process, but they must be dealing with them one-on-one and not through a third-party agency.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it used to require, again, when it was proposed, I'll give a slight history. History under the old taxi bylaw in Ottawa was a vulnerable sector check. It was one of the few cities that had that under a pre-existing bylaw, taxi limousine. Fast forward to Uber, and this is about a year and a bit ago, talking about possible regulation for the ride-sharing industry. The issue that we push back again is, again, not about public safety. We happen to think a general criminal background check that's done by every other city ought to be okay in Ottawa too, since most of the cities are over here doing a standard criminal background check. They had a legacy issue with the vulnerable sector check. So we said to the city, this doesn't work for a lot of people, having them to come down to City Hall. And they said, nope, we're not going to require that. We're going to have the process where they come to you. The police background check at the time, the vulnerable sector in Ottawa, did require drivers to go in person. And we said, okay, can we make this process more efficient? Can we work out an arrangement where the police originally, believe it or not, was actually coming down to our green light hubs where drivers can come in person if they wanted to have maybe an issue with their phone they wanted to talk to a human being at Uber about. We were actually having Ottawa police stationed in our green light hub in Ottawa to make the process more efficient. And then that wasn't efficient enough either. So now Ottawa has got an online process where a prospective driver can apply online through the city for that process, which makes it more efficient.
Okay, Woody?
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Vice Chair Ganzo.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. This is a comprehensive report, and the board obviously will give it consideration along with all the others. The one thing, and I always bring this up, not signed. I know who you are because you've come before us before, so I don't know who's the author. Not signed as the others have. No address. It used to be on King Street in Toronto, I believe. And, you know, Uber is Uber, but where is this from? California, Toronto, Montreal? There's no indication as to what I would consider legality of the document. As much as it's on a letterhead, there's no address, no signature, no contact. You're the presenter. Your name's not referenced in here. In fact, no names are referenced in here. So I always bring this up every time you're here. We don't operate through Twitter as a communications platform with an organization. There's no way for us to communicate. And I believe, yes, the board probably has your email address, but we have no way of communicating back to you on a document which you've put in basically the public domain.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Vice Chair. It was sent via email with the appropriate information there. The address, if you'd like, I can speak it into the record.
But I think Deb is confirming what you're saying. Is that right, Deb?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I do have a copy of the covering email, and perhaps I should have attached it to the submission, but I didn't do that. So.
Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Do you have any other questions? Member Stewart.
Yes, I just have a question, and it revolves around the whole checks thing. We know that any police check of any variety is a moment in time. And being on this board for a long time, there have been occasions where following meeting all of the checks, there have been licensed drivers and operators that have serious charges leveled against them, such that for public safety, we don't want them driving until it's cleared up. I'm wondering, how does Uber deal with that, in the sense that, based on what I'm hearing here, that Coburg, for example, wouldn't do any follow-up with you, whereas in Niagara, charges get registered, the drivers are checked on a regular basis to make sure that there's nothing has changed to make an unsafe situation, and all of our licensed people have to deal with that. So I'm curious, in your situation, how do you deal with the fact that 3 months after you've licensed it, for example, a licensed Uber driver is now charged with sexual assault, which would be, say, an example where we'd say, look, we don't want them driving until this is cleared up because we don't want to put other people at risk until this is sorted out. What process do you have to deal with something like that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So again, you're right, the background check is a check in period of time. It can't predict a future possibility. No background check, unfortunately, can do that. In terms of how that would work, so for example, and again, in cities across Ontario where we're running the process through the Coburg Police Server that's tapping those databases I've outlined in my submission, it could come to us in a variety of ways. We have safety teams, law enforcement liaison teams that are in correspondence with police. So it could come to us in a variety of ways. It could, in theory, come to us as a result of a news report. It could come to us as a result of a police reaching out, often through production orders or other tools. It could come to us through a report through the app by a rider. In theory, that could happen as well. So there's a variety of ways in which that information could come to our attention, in addition to the regulator, so here the licensing unit, or a regulator in another city informing us of a charge. So there's a variety of ways in which that information comes to us currently in cities. Niagara region, admittedly, is a little bit different in the sense that it's a police service that has access to databases that it can rerun searches on a basis or frequency with which they desire. That isn't happening in other cities.
Can I, Craig, the example that Member Stewart just gave about a sexual assault charge coming up, is that caught in your weekly cross-referencing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It should be. The process is the driver information has to be entered into our system first. So again, that would be the challenge. Even if we went to an audit-based system, we would have to have all that driver information current in our database in order to make those checks happen.
If it did show up, then I presume on a TNC, or whether it's Uber or anybody else, you're going to tell them. You're going to tell Uber of the charge?
Through you, Mr. Chair. If we become aware of any serious criminal charges, we will investigate, and if we determine it is applicable to the license, we will notify Uber that we have concerns. We will not give them the particulars. We can't pass that along. But we'll notify them that that party should be removed from their platform and should not be allowed to drive in Niagara.
Okay. Thanks, Craig. So what happens then, Chris? We tell you we got concerns, we want them removed. What do you do?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the beauty of the technology is that we can remotely deactivate, suspend, if you like, their access to the app. They may or may not be innocent with respect to a particular charge. That's for the courts to sort out. But if we were to receive that information through one of the means in which I've described earlier, just previously, we would suspend their access, so they would no longer be able to get trip requests on the app. They'd still have their own personal family car, of course, and they could drive, but they would no longer get access to any trip requests at all through the Uber app.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, one thing I want to tell everyone out there, if you are up at the podium or you have any comments to make, you have until November 30th to make comments to us. It's probably written on a sheet. Our email address is PSB, Police Service Board, psb@niagarapolice.ca. If you don't remember that, Don at the back will give it to you when you leave. So if you don't have time, you have to leave, and you want to send it to us, that's fine. If there's anything that you've got and you miss, if Mr. Schaefer has missed a point that he wants to say when he gets back, he can email us to correct something or whatever the case may be. Mr. Schaefer, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Board. I appreciate the time.
Okay, our next speaker will be Mr. Marc-Andre Way from Coventry Connections, please. Thank you, Mark. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Board. My name is Marc-Andre Way. I'm the new CEO of Coventry Connection. I'm also the, and I used to be the CEO. Sure. So I'm the CEO of Coventry Connections. I'm also the president of the Canadian Taxi Association. Coventry operates in 6 municipalities. We have over 1,500 taxis. As an association, we represent we represent cities across Canada: Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, and Halifax, to name a few. We have over 30,000 taxi cabs, owner-operators, 50,000 taxi drivers, and just to give you an idea of size, we do probably $2 billion in consumer transactions annually. The reason I'm saying this is that we're the group that actually went to the HST, to the government, and fought for the HST to be applied to all drivers equally, including PTC drivers. So we're all about fairness. What we're looking for is a level playing field for everyone. I have comments to make about some of the things I've heard today, which I will afterwards. But first of all, what I'd like to address is the pilot project that has been initiated a year ago, and that is opening the region's boundaries to the taxi plates. I believe that the project is successful. I can tell you that it's something that we would encourage you to continue. Response time has improved up to and including 10 minutes in most municipalities today, whereas before it was 20 minutes to half hour. Part of that is the improvement of the systems that we've put into our taxis, where we dispatch through a process that is much more efficient than what we used to have in the past. We now have apps, we have text booking, we have a series of ways for people to actually book their taxis. What that has given is an increased level in service, and you can, and from the information that we get from the customers, it's much better. I'll give you a perfect example where in the past someone would call a taxi before jumping in the shower. Today, they don't do that anymore because the taxi is there within 10 minutes. They don't even have time to take their showers. So these are funny stories that we go through when as the service improves. The other item on the agenda that I see on the taxi side is the opening of licenses and issuance of new licenses. So again, something that we're not against, but I can give you examples of what happens in Ottawa, and I think that it's something that you should consider. If you are looking at putting out some licenses, I would not put a large number out, because you do not want an oversaturation of the taxi market all at once. One thing that you should consider is, and that seems is very important, is the OADA Act, which is a Government of Ontario initiative, where they're looking at making all services accessible to everyone, i.e. mobility constraint, right up to service dogs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In Ottawa, what we've done is the additional plates were issued as accessible plates, only accessible plates. And we are in a market now that is growing, aging rather, and we are in need of probably more accessible plates across the region. So I would encourage that if you are considering putting out plates, that those would be accessible. I heard a lot of comments about taxis and Uber in Ottawa, and I'd like to address some of those. And some of those that what I'd like to say is it's the same old, same old. It's the same story from one municipality to the other. We will comply, we will do what you want, how you want, it's all beautiful, and as the years move forward, we're gonna try and water down those regulations. So I'm talking about the PTCs. Water down those regulations and get what we want eventually. Some of the misinformation that I keep hearing is that a PTC driver works only 5 to 10 hours. Well, I can tell you that that's not right. In Ottawa, it is not 5 to 10 hours. It's some ex-taxi drivers that have jumped and have gone to do work with Uber and actually come back to us because they can't earn a living. And they work 12 hours a day. It's not 5 to 10 hours. We heard a lot about the vulnerable background check being able to be done online. It is true. You can fill out your application online. This is new as of this year, by the way. But if by any chance there is something that needs to be verified, you have to go in person. So if you have the same last name as somebody else, if for any reason there's something there, you have to go to the station, you have to fill out you have to meet someone, you have to be fingerprinted in order to get your vulnerable background check. So it's not an easy process that can be done online, and I want to make sure that you're aware of those facts. I heard something about, well, we just suspend them if they're not compliant. You have an individual out there who has been carrying passengers for a period of 2 to 3 months, probably has built some relationships, probably has built some connections. It doesn't prevent him from having a telephone number and not needing a platform, whether a taxi platform or whether an Uber platform or a PTC platform, in order to go out and pick up some rides. So to just say I'm going to shut down his app is not the right thing to do. You need a local presence like we do, where in every municipality our office will call in the driver, we will introduce and sit with him, make sure he understands what's going on, and then report to the authorities what we found out and how we do the process. It's not just a question of shutting off an app and having someone go out and work again. So to me, there's something wrong with this way of dealing with your drivers. There has to be some kind of communication. One of the things that I think that the board should consider is in-car cameras. It's something that is extremely useful, and that should be straight across the board, whether it's an Uber driver, whether it's a taxi, whoever is transporting someone for hire. It is a great tool to have for 2 reasons. Number 1, it protects the driver, and number 2, it protects the consumer. And from what I know, or what I hear, is that the municipality is in the job of protecting the consumers and the drivers or its citizens. And cameras, I can tell you, is an extremely useful tool. We have them in Ottawa. We've just renewed revamped some of our systems to have front-forward facing cameras and rear cabin cameras in order to be able to have witnesses or electronic witnesses to accidents or to some kind of altercations that happen in the cab. Again, it's an extremely useful tool to have. One of the problems we're seeing in Ottawa with PTCs, and there's more than one in Ottawa now, is identification of the vehicles. And our bylaw really stipulates that you cannot park in taxi stands, you cannot be sitting around waiting for a fare in a grocery mall or something.
Mark, I have to interrupt you. I got to wrap this up in a minute or two.
Okay,
thank you.
The point I'm trying to make is that PTCs should be identified by a sticker, by some kind of method of identification in order to be able to be properly regulated so that bylaw has the tool to regulate them properly. Now they're unidentifiable and you can't find them.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to do that to anybody with 1 minute left.
No, that's fair.
That's fair. So one thing I'm going to say is that I won't allow a debate here, but I understand you made some comments about Uber. If Mr. Schaefer wishes to email Deb with any comebacks on anything, or anybody here wishes to email, you have the right to till November 30th. So, Woody, do you have any questions of Mark?
Yeah, I do, Mark. Just let me figure out what it was.
Would you like me to go to staff first?
Yeah, go to staff, because I've got to just...
You don't have any questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no questions, thank you.
Okay, then I'll go to the board. Does anybody, Member Bonham?
Yes, thank you, Chair Gale. And Mr. Way, I got your comment with regard to what you would do with, or you're concerned about what another competitor would do should they receive information that would suggest that somebody should not be driving and not providing the service to the public. And the response from a previous presenter was that they would take them off the platform. And your point's well taken that off the platform or not, they've developed some connections as a consequence of driving for 3 or 4 months and therefore could be in the illegal transit business at their own discretion. What would prevent a taxi driver in your association from doing the same thing? In other words, you've got a complaint, you've sat down with the driver, you've explained to them, I guess, why they are no longer going to be licensed, etc. What prevents that individual from doing the same thing as somebody working from one of your competitors doing, and that is using their prior contacts to continue in the business on a QT basis? Thank you.
One of the things that we heard is that the individual would still has his personal car and keeps running. In our case, most of our drivers are shift drivers or drivers that do not own the car. So there's really nothing that would prevent them from going out to buy a car and actually doing the same thing. I agree with you. But I think that by simply not just turning off the app and having the person coming in and having that discussion, 2 things happen. Number one, there's clarity, whether it is a very serious assault or not, or issue or not. And there is some latitude from our part, and then there's monitoring. The other part is you're making the person aware of why he is being canceled, and this particular individual may in fact choose to go down the route of seeking some kind of remedy to come back to work. So that's the point I'm trying to make. It's the approach is different and the result is usually different.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board right now? No? Woody?
Member Bonham asked the second question I was going to ask, so I'll just go to the first one. You talked about the in Ottawa, people having to attend the police station on the vulnerable sector check issue. Is that when that's not the norm? That's when something has to be clarified, I assume, is it?
So most of the time, yes, that's right. That's when something needs to be clarified. Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's good.
No other questions, Woody? Any questions from the board? Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, please, is Mr. Emmanuel Kashunga. Please. Thank you. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but I hope I was close. Could you please just tell us what company you're with and press the button there, please? Thanks.
My name is Emmanuel Kachunga. I'm with Central Taxi. I made a submission with a few points, and what I'd like to do is read the submission, and then I can answer questions if you have, because the submission is on a summary. If anything is not clear, I can make it more clear. Before I even go to that, I'd like to come back to the answer that the gentleman here asked to the CEO of Central Taxi about a cab driver that would be found not be able to drive a cab and what they would do. His answer was good, but it was incomplete. First of all, cab drivers drive a marked vehicle. It says which company they drive for. If they cannot drive a taxi anymore, they have contact. I do have contact. But I will not drive a taxi. It would not say Central Taxi on my door. I would probably, if I have a car, I would go with my own car. But I am not a taxi driver anymore. What the other people would not do. So coming back to my own submission, okay, I'm just going to read the submission. First of all, this submission is about competition by TNCs, region-wide use of taxi licenses, wheelchair accessible, and quotas. Let's come to competition. There is unfair competition. We have always complained about TNCs doing unfair competition to taxis by not having commercial insurance and not going through background check like we do. It was good news to hear that Uber has started offering commercial insurance to their drivers every time they accept a fare offered through the application on their phone. I mean, this is where the problem is, because Uber's fare rates fluctuate, that is, it's cheaper at slow time, and 3, 4, 5 times higher than taxis at peak time. What students do is, we are a student region here, I mean a university region. Students collect Uber drivers' cell phone numbers when they hail a ride through the app at slow time. And now at peak time, they call Uber drivers directly on the cell phone and negotiate a better rate rather than going through the app because it's higher. Thus cheating on Uber, the company, and doing business without commercial insurance. Second point, except Uber, all other TNCs still operate without commercial insurance and no background check. Third point, taxis don't make money at night anymore. Too many unmarked vehicles picking up fares at night in the entertainment district in downtown St. Catharines. Our own investigation has shown that in addition to Uber and other TNCs like Speedy Delivery, Original, Speedy, Zoom, etc., any person willing to make some extra money on weekend can come and do some runs back and forth peacefully. They do it peacefully now. Even people coming from the bars can jump in their cars parked on the side of the road and pick up fares. And what they do, what these TNCs do, they take people, more people than they have seat belts. We don't do that, but they do. Fourth point, nightlife designated taxi stands in the downtown St. Catharines are flooded by TNCs. They should not be allowed to stand in front of bars because they don't have commercial insurance. Their representatives here say they work 5 to 10 hours, but some of them are former cab drivers. We see them on the road 12 hours or more. Even for Uber, their insurance only kicks in when a fare is held through the app, not when a person jumps in their car, in an unmarked car, standing in front of a bar and negotiate a rate. Now, good competition. Uber competition has not been bad all the way. It has had a positive impact. As a matter of fact, with the arrival of Uber, because they compete with us mostly on technology, the taxi industry has been striving to stay in business by competing and demonstrating that they are the best alternative. This has led many taxi companies to invest in technology like or better than Uber and to improve their customer service. For example, I work with Central Taxi. The wait time went from 15 to 30 minutes to 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes I get to a customer's place within 2 minutes. And this is how we beat the competition, because students call all the companies at the same time, and the first to be there get the fare. This is good competition. And every time there is competition, it works in the interest of the customers. Le client est roi. That's what they say. Most people understand what I say. Region-wide use of taxi licenses. Regional-wide use of taxi licenses is good and brings competition where there was monopoly. And whenever there is competition, there is improvement. I have taken calls in cities like Welland, Port Colborne, Grimsby, Bimsville, Niagara on the Lake, and heard stories like, I called the local company 1 or 2 hours ago. I finally gave up and called you guys and see you've shown up in no time. They are still nowhere to be seen. I also heard things like, I like you guys because your cars are clean and your drivers are nice to customers. Another point, wheelchair accessible. There are enough wheelchair accessible vehicles in the region. However, on occasions like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, the only times when families like to gather and try to take their disabled elderly parents out at the same time, people can wait for hours to get a ride for their loved disabled elderly. Unlike vehicles, accessible vehicles that can convert in regular taxis when not needed by disabled, regular taxis cannot convert to accessible when demand is high for those specialty vehicles. Not to mention that some elderly people cannot be kept too long away from their caregivers. You don't need a cartoon for that. Taxi quotas.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll need you to wrap up in about 1.5 minutes, okay?
Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you.
It is absurd to issue an indefinite number of TNC licenses and put quotas for taxis. Do it for everybody or don't do it. And make everybody pay commercial insurance full-time and not just some people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Woody, I'll go to you first, or I'll go to service, whatever you wish.
I just want to make sure that I understand. You're not suggesting get rid of taxi quotas. You're just saying do it all the same, one way or the other? Either quotas for TNCs and for taxi, or no quotas for anybody?
What I'm saying is, if you issue an indefinite number of licenses for TNCs, do it for taxis as well. Or if you want to leave quotas for taxis, do it for TNCs as well.
Okay, and okay, I understand, yeah. And the other concern, or one of the other concerns you had earlier, it sounds to me like your concern is that, for example, an Uber driver has a better opportunity to operate illegally by going to a cab stand or by accepting street hails. Is that your point there?
They do it. We have nightlife designated taxi stands. We used to be the only one there. That is, we stand in front of bars when people, after drinking, they come to you and then you give them a ride. Now, TNCs are legal. What we see is they've already used the taxi stand and then we have to stand behind them. They are marked. You don't know which is which. Some are Uber, some are Speedy, Original, Zoom Zoom. They have different names, okay? Or anybody willing to make some extra money can come and stay there peacefully and take people and go. Now, we don't make money anymore. These are taxi stands, designated nightlife taxi stands. Why are they coming there? Furthermore, they don't have commercial insurance when someone comes like that. Because at that time, Uber, the company, thinks that they're not operating because they think that they are part-time. But they are working.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Basically, they're operating outside of Uber's rules and operating outside the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, sounds like you have a lot of enforcement concerns, and I understand you. Detective LeBon, do you have any comments?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Sir, my only question actually is, are any of these vehicles that you're mentioning, any of them, do they have decals in the windows, or are they all without decals?
They are marked no decals, nothing. You can't identify them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Is there any questions from the board? Okay, Emmanuel, sorry I call you by first name, but
yeah, that's fine.
You have a lot of concerns about enforcement. I want you, if you still have those concerns in a few weeks, we will get back to you on this. Could you please email the PSB board okay. And that if this is still persisting in 2 or 3 weeks, I guess we have to do more enforcement. We have to look at that because a lot of your concerns are things that we make up the rules and people aren't following, it sounds like. So please don't give up. Please send us, see how it goes. Talk to Detective LeBon and hopefully things get solved. Certainly, we don't catch every speeder, we don't catch everything out there, but we have to have more enforcement on it. Possibly that's what you're leading to. So please keep in touch with us. If in a month, things are still happening, email the police service board if you wish, or keep in touch with Detective LeBon. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. We're good. The next speaker is Mr. Dalibor Bogdanovic, President of Niagara Falls Taxi. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody. So over 35 years serving the community, the biggest company in Niagara Falls, we would like to address two, mainly the quotas and the open region pilot program from the last year. So those two issues are interrelated, so I'm going to be, when I mention one reason for what we are standing for, it's going to be related to another one. So if you have any questions after, you can ask me. So the first one, Niagara Falls Taxi, it's recommending to close the region open pilot program because of the several reasons. So the one is Niagara Falls is sui generis, so in English translation, it's case on its own. So we have the taxi plates issued for Niagara Falls Taxi are well over the population ratio even now. So couple reasons that we have a high season, that's why we need more taxis for the tourists. Our traffic infrastructure and the roads, they don't support in the peak season and during the long weekends, they don't support the traffic. So getting the open region, we have a lot of cabs coming from places, smaller towns, and causing delay over there, people waiting, and connecting to that, I'm going to give you the research that I mentioned in July 2017, so I have it here. It was delayed, mainly intentionally on my side, because I was thinking how you guys going to understand the whole concept of the research, because the quotas that you mentioned, it's not the problem, the taxi license numbers, it's the positioning of the taxis that's the problem. With opening the region, we have smaller towns that used to be designated taxi plates are now leaving for St. Catharines or Niagara Falls. So that was the main reason why I did the research in July about DUI charges before application of the pilot program and after. So another thing to mention is the pollution here. So Niagara Falls Taxi is mostly eco-friendly. Over 80% of the vehicles are hybrids. So we also take care about our city in that way. following that, it's also the safety. So when we have congestion with the traffic, we cannot move, we cannot give service. So everything is interrelated in this issue about the wide open region pilot program. Another thing, I'm just gonna update what common sense, but I'm just gonna mention that I agree with the Uber time frame that Mr. Schaffer mentioned about the 5 to 10 hours a week. I have a lot of reports, even from people that I know used to drive Niagara Falls taxi, now driving full-time Uber. It's maybe between 5 and 12 a day, not a week. So that's also that I gotta mention. So that would be it. About the insurance policy, I would also recommend, if when you have a time, Central Taxi and Niagara Falls Taxi are with liabilities over $5 million. It's also something that improves, enhances the safety of the public. So, and Uber insurance is something that we should look for. Also, TNC and taxi industry are two different legal entities. So I wouldn't mix them with the quotas, because the last gentleman that just mentioned that we should be equal, those are separate, different legal entities defined by the bylaw. So we should apply an approach to them in a different manner. Because this sir is telling that he doesn't make any money, but at the same time he's asking to open quotas, he's going to make even less. So I don't understand that argument. That would be all for now. If you have any questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Delabar. Woody?
Sir, when you were talking about the data that you gave to the board about
I didn't give it to the board. I have it here, but I just mentioned.
Okay.
I have it now.
Is that the same stuff that you gave to us last year?
Yes.
Okay, we have it then. Okay.
I don't know if
is it updated? From last year?
Updated. Yeah. I just put.
Can you? We should have that to consider.
Yeah,
Can you give that to Deb? Okay. Thanks, sir. That's all that I have, Bob.
Okay. Thank you for that. Detective LeBon, do you have?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay. I see none. Do you have anything else right here? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So now we have a list of general submissions from the industry. At this point, I'd like to open the meeting to the floor for general licensing submissions or comments on the vehicles for hire bylaw. Deb has a list of people here. Deb, do you mind reading out the names as we go? But hold on 1 second. I'm going to watch the time on this so we're not here all day. So, and I'll be a bit flexible. We're going to play this by ear. But if you have new points, I'm not going to cut into you, but I'd like to hold it to 3 or 4 minutes if we can. But believe me, if you're making new ground here on that, I'm not going to cut into you. Just one thing I do ask, if you're just repeating something that somebody else said, please say I support whatever, and we'll move on, because otherwise I'm going to be missing somebody here, or you're going to be sitting there for a long time. So Deb, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. We have 5 individuals that have indicated they wish to speak, and the first is Ashwani Sharma. And if I could also ask for your name of the company, I can't read it on the sheet.
Ashwani Sharma?
Sharma.
Not here?
Okay.
Go ahead. Well, now I'll allow a few more minutes for each person, I guess. So. Go ahead.
The next person is Paul Walker, Elite Taxi. Thank you.
Please.
Yes.
Turned it off. They had left it on. You're
Surprise. Good to go. Hi, my name is Paul Walker. I own Elite Taxi. I've been in the taxi industry for, I hate to admit it, sometimes 33 years, 13 of which is operating my own company. I've had good staff, good relations in the community. I do a lot of work for entities in the community still. I don't have a whole lot of vehicles left, but I've got people that appreciate what we bring, the service. I wrote down some points that I think are very pertinent to, and another point that I had to throw up was Uber and compliance. I'm sorry that the two words just don't seem to go together, but the regional plates that were thrown wide open per se, why was that done? Who requested that? Was it a company from out of town trying to cover contract work, or why was it thrown open? It makes no sense that a small community that the vehicles are there to service loses the vehicles there for them. If you're in Fort Erie and you need a taxi or you need a wheelchair vehicle, and you call, where's your vehicle? Well, I'm not going to hang around down here. I'm going to go to St. Catharines and Niagara Falls, per se. Lots of vehicles now are sent from big companies to Fort Erie to cover local jobs, and you drive to Fort Erie, you do a short job, you're not going to be very happy when they pay you demand is down. I think that one of the initial reasons that it was thought of to expand taxis working in the region was the initial problem with Saturday nights in St. Catharines. We had bar rushes, and the bar owners were saying, we're not covered, we need more, we need more, we need more. I think that the entrance to the industry of Uber and additional speedy vehicles and unlicensed vehicles, as you've heard, people that actually are at work trying to make a living, see the Uber vehicles show up, and whether other companies other than just Uber, they park on the streets, they park on the stands, they take the cream off the top, per se. They're always an entity that's there. So the desire and the need for extra capacity has been mitigated by vehicles that are in the way, per se, or not doing it the way they're supposed to. So the local companies sit behind them and out-of-town taxis waiting to get their jobs, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you're a local company and you know what you're doing, you know where you're going, it'd be a nice way to go. Parking on the street, a company in Niagara Falls has the bus station. There's a 2-car taxi stand on the bus property. Normally say 3 out of 5 of those plates are from out of town covering the bus station. So one of them sticks out and covers the sidewalk. To counteract, another local company in Niagara Falls that has a stand across the street, they have now pulled around, parked into the WeGo restricted bus parking spots in front of the bus station, and they park there all day to defend what they're going to get. I don't see how that is the proper way to operate, and if you're from St. Catharines, per se, or whatever, I don't think you really care. You get somebody that comes down from wherever, around the world, literally, comes down on the bus, they get somebody from out of town. One instance, that didn't happen to me, but one of my drivers said he got waved over to pick somebody up and take him somewhere, and they were unhappy with the local, the taxi sitting on the bus stand. They're always given flat rates to where they're going. I want $25 to go to the casino, 25. Why do you do that? We're a local company, we've been here too many years, but we operate to stay in business and take care of the tourists that come to our city, our area, and have a good rapport with them, and they're happy when they get out, we're happy to bring them back. People from out of town, sadly, at times have a different opinion and a way of operating, that I'm just here to make some money, I'm going back out of town. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Another entity that's happening down here, I'm not sure if it's your realm per se, but I've done taxi work. I started 13 years ago when nobody else was really into it. I did a ton of work for it. I've had a lot of nice feedback from the people we've met and serviced and the families related to them. The region has, for some reason, put out contracts for a company that's an NTS, whatever, out of Mississauga. And when I'm doing transfers for dialysis and that, I see the NTS vans. Why is that not kept locally? I'm not sure if you have any say in that for whatever, but why am I looking at out-of-town companies servicing our local residents. I was driving one guy from down towards St. David's, and they couldn't keep him with me because they had to send him to St. Catharines for capacity. So they took him away from me because they sent him in NTS to St. Catharines because they got subsidized by the region. Entities like that don't make a lot of sense to local people that have been here a long time, try to do a good job. Another company from Burlington, when they can't cover it, they call me to cover their work. Right at home, it's called. Like, why is NHS giving work to Burlington companies per se, and then they can't handle it, and they, well, can you pick up this one for you? Can you? I try to do it. I bend over backwards to do it.
Mr. Walker, you got about a minute still.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. Appreciate it. To cover some of the rush Saturday night plates, shortage of taxis, they had spare plates put out with an orange tag. I'm not sure what the reasoning was to put them on the road to cover a rush. I still see those plates out here. With Uber and other entities overcoming the top of demand down here, I don't see if or why they would still be out there. The tourists come to town, we like to take care of them. I don't think that's happening. I think Uber and other things have overwhelmed it. I find it very interesting, his point about the insurance, because I can assure you, ask anybody out there in the audience, that they will sit in taxi stands in front of places on the road in the casino to grab work. It happens every day, more and more so on the weekend. Really, why are we taking taxis out of local entities, local communities that are there to be serviced by those people when they go, I'm going to Niagara Falls, why would I bother staying here? Other than that, thank you.
Thank you very much. The NTS issue, I'll ask Deb to email the region for it, because that's a regional response we should get from them. So,
very true.
Okay, Niagara Health System then, but it's not us, so I'll get a response for you.
I just
again, keep track that you do get a response. If not, get back to us, but I'll make sure you get a response from the agency involved with that. Woody, do you have questions for Mr. Walker?
Where is Elite Taxi operated out of?
Niagara Falls, Ontario.
Niagara Falls, okay.
13 years.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know. I'm from St. Catharines. So.
Is that it, Woody? Is that Executive Bond?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The only questions I wanted are clarification, sir. This is the first I've heard of out-of-town taxis. Do you have any specific examples that you could provide my staff afterwards? You don't have to speak about that right now, but we would love that information, because I haven't, and I'll defer to my staff, but they're all saying no. We haven't received any information that there's any out-of-town taxis operating here illegally.
I'm not saying illegally.
Oh.
I'm saying once it goes region-wide, taxis in the region leave their communities that they're designed.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So the clarification is when you say out of town, you mean out of municipality, not out of the region.
No, totally correct.
Okay, so that was a clarification.
Why are they leaving the communities they're there to service?
That was the clarification I was looking for. Thank you very much.
If you look for a vehicle and it's in Niagara Falls, it's Saturday night or something, right? It doesn't make sense. That plus Uber's taking the cream off the top. I don't think you need people going back and forth.
And the only other clarification, sir, is with the spare plates. You're still seeing the spare plates in operation? Because
yeah,
yeah, it was correct. Right. It was a pilot project prior to the regionalization pilot project for the plates, but that has since ceased. So we will definitely look into that.
Fair enough. Appreciate it.
Vice Chair Ganzel.
Thank you, and for you, Chair. Just a question on the, I'll call it patient transfer.
Yes.
You get a request from the Niagara Health System by saying, please pick up patient X and deliver them to the hospital. Is that correct?
Yes,
or are they calling you directly?
They call me.
The hospital or the patient?
It could be one or the other. Normally it's the health system. It could be, I've met and dealt with so many people. I had the 3 accessible plates for years when other companies were not that much into it. I've delivered people for dialysis.
No, that's fine. I'm just trying to sort of drill through, because I'm sure. Interested in the engagement and the reference to.
I deal with Joanne from Niagara Health System.
No, that's fine. So they give you basically an order to move person A from their home to St. Catharines and take them back. And I'm assuming you have they compensate you, that's how you get paid for that trip?
The health system does, or it goes through dialysis, or
okay, that's fine.
Could be the home they're from, a lot of.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted
homes.
just to clarify that. Yep. Thank you.
I worked for the region in Heartland Forest, NCIL. I worked for a lot of big entities in the region. They appreciate what my staff and I bring to the table.
What do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, well, it goes back to something you said about this issue of regional plates, and then you're also talking really about the illegals, either Uber drivers operating illegally or speedy or whatever.
It's a big issue on the weekends.
Yeah, I know it is. Which is a bigger issue for you, the region-wide plates or the illegals, if I can use that term?
It's a good question. I drive the wheelchair vehicle myself. I have staff that drive the taxi. They see it more than I do. But when I go through, if for the odd night I don't have a driver in, I'll get in it, and you can see them lined up where they're not supposed to be. The regional stuff, if you go by the bus station in Niagara Falls, I don't care how you want to cut it or word it and make little whatevers, you'll see usually 3 out of 5 are out-of-town plates sitting there. The 2-car stand, they got 3 and one's covering the sidewalk, and they'll go around the corner. You go through the casino, there's local taxis sitting outside, they can't get in because there's a set number of spaces in the stand. So I go through and I read the licensing. Well, that's out of town, that's out of town. Well, why do I need those when any deficiencies that were in the transportation system have been covered up by what is come from Uber, taking it off the top? Why would you have these people come from out of town? If they need taxis in St. Catharines, per se, why aren't they staying in service theirs? Why are you coming here? And we're sitting behind other people that, you know, they get in, tell me about Niagara Falls. Well, I don't know, I'm from St. Catharines or something. Or they're flat rating tourists that go to the casino or their hotel or by the falls, and it's just, my driver told me he was in the last week, is the people that get in, they were quite upset, though. Why are they doing that? And turned the meter around, took them, and they were happy. And at the end, they said, yeah, this is what happened. And he's heard it from several people that I think the local people do a better job, and the demand has been washed away or covered easily by outside entities.
So can you say one is a bigger problem than the other, or are they both just problems that are there? And I'm talking illegals versus out-of-town taxis.
I couldn't say it.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Look at you gave a good answer.
I would hesitate to say because I don't know exactly,
okay.
But it exists,
yeah.
And it's not hard to see.
Okay, that's good. Good, thanks, Paul.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? One thing that's been brought up here a few times is enforcement, and for the same reason, if a member of the public complained about speeding on Sodom Road or whatever the case may be, I have a duty to bring it to the chief and see what things can be done. So I hope that everybody here has a rapport with Detective Sergeant Labana and brings their issues to Detective Sergeant Labana, and he responds to you. If you don't get a response, that's our fault and that. But these issues that come up, please make sure that Detective Laban gets back to you. If there's any more that come up here, send an email to us or Detective Laban, but we have a duty to enforce these things. And we know we miss every now and then.
It happens, we're not looking for perfection.
But I appreciate you bringing this up.
Reality.
So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate
Deb, who is next?
Yes, thank you. The next speakers are Kathy Plantinitis and Peter Madronis.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for letting us speak today to everyone here. Peter and I he's standing behind me, but probably I'll do the talking for both of us. So much to say, so little time. It's very confusing sometimes when we're dealing with these issues. We hear all kinds of wonderful things, and then we have to refute some things that have been said. I think I'd like to start off by saying the new CEO of Uber, Dara Khosrowshahi, excuse me, forgive me if I didn't say his name properly, just took over in August, I believe, and his mandate is to correct the negative image that Uber has been accumulating. One of the pushes for his worldwide trip is an apology to his own drivers. Let's not talk about the taxi industry, let's not talk about the legal parts of it. Let's just talk about how Uber deals with their own drivers. Peter and I were in a meeting in Vaughan, and we had an Uber driver. We didn't. He approached the podium and he spoke. And he addressed the council members on the fact that as an Uber driver, he is being undercut left, right, and center on all of his runs. And this was brought to his attention when he finally asked one of his customers, "What are you charged for this fare?" I know he's not here to back up my story, but I'm just going to throw this out there. $85, they told him. Really? They pay me $60. There wasn't a single question from the members there to address this concern about a driver standing up there saying all of this about his employer. Susan Fowler blogged some time back about sexual harassment at Uber, which eventually led to Travis Kalanick having to step down. This also led to the discovery of Uber's use of grayball technology. I'm not sure if we're aware of what grayball technology is, but it was devised and used by Uber. I'm not sure if it was devised by them, but it was used by Uber, which I have several articles to back it up, to disguise their activities to evade law enforcement. And not only that, they were grayballing potential customers who would come on to their platform. They would search through their credit card information, see if they were connected to anybody involved with government. Sorry. See if they're involved with any government. Is that better? Okay. Any government jobs, if they were connected to the police, if they were connected with any kinds of these things. The use of grayball technology was written up in the New York Times recently, and Uber has had to, backpedal and try to explain. Here is a Wikipedia definition of grayball. And here is a fantastic article written again by the New York Times, I believe. Uber plays with fire. And it has to do with all the sexual harassment charges within the company itself. And now we're seeing it trickle down even to the drivers on their platform. It was mentioned earlier that Uber is in compliance, full compliance with whatever the cities and municipalities wish. In the city of Toronto alone, we have a few city councillors that are approaching this subject, that Uber has been required to display a decal in the back window of their vehicles. And there are probably 1 in 100 that do, if. So that's not compliance. In Quebec, we heard recently that Uber was going to leave Quebec. And why? Because of stricter regulations that were expected to be put on them. One of them was 35 hours for driver training, which is 15 hours more than the previous requirement. And the other one was a proper criminal background check. This doesn't sound to me like a company that wants to comply and to get along with municipalities. They just want their own way.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got to have you wrap up in about a minute, if that's okay. Thanks.
Really? That was really quick.
Sorry.
26 pages. who'sdrivingyou.org. Many Uber situations. I'm just going to quickly address the sexual assaults that have been going on in Toronto alone. In Oakville, recently, I believe it was Oakville, it's here in my phone, where we're told that an Uber driver if somebody's been on the platform who's been charged, or who has been charged previously, can't get on the platform, he was in breach of probation and was charged with an alleged assault. All of these things can be documented, and I can provide all of this information that I have in front of me. Magazine headline, Uber fail. Harvard Business Law, Uber can't be fixed. It's time for regulators to shut it down. All kinds of different things are going on worldwide. So I have a couple of articles here of sexual assaults. One was right at my daughter's school, at the corner of where my daughter goes to school. Kidnap and assault. Our Uber drivers coming in from different jurisdictions, picking up passengers. Another one was just in Curtis. It just happened recently in October, where the Uber driver posed as an Uber driver and just picked up this woman at a club and took her home and proceeded to allegedly sexually assault her. So I think there's a lot of concerns, and I think there's a lot of loopholes and holes in their presentation and what they say that they do and what they say that how they comply.
Okay,
I don't
I have
see
to
it.
interrupt you soon. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're already over
We
time, and I
don't
have to be
see
fair.
it.
Okay.
That's all I have
So
to
now
say.
you have documents on all these things. Are you going to share them with us?
I can leave some today, or I can email it all, because I have many.
Email it all. It's
I'm going to
perfect.
email them all.
And Deb will respond to you that she's received it. So PSP
And she
at
has
Niagara Police.
before, so that's fine. I know
Excellent.
that she will.
Thank you very much. Woody,
questions?
do you have any questions?
I was just going to ask about the documents, so you did that, so I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have them.
Detective LeBon.
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Members of the
Okay,
board.
thank you.
Okay, Deb will get, or you're going to email them, so
I'll
we're
email
good.
everything
Thank you
to
very
them.
much. Appreciate it. Deb, who's next?
The next speaker is Stefan Roshanov. I hope I said that correctly. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. My name is Stefan Roshanov. I've been in the taxi business for over 20 years now. Niagara Falls Taxi. I've seen better times in the taxi industry. My biggest concern was pretty much covered by Kathy. I fully support what she was talking about. One thing about the taxi industry is that we're not in a good position for a number of things now. The Uber and other taxi providers like them are getting in the area where we were providing service for a long, long time. We know the city. We care about our customers. We have a very good record of serving our customers in a way of the response time for Niagara Falls Taxi is 5 minutes or less. That brings me to the region, the open region issue. There are cities in, for example, Fort Erie is one of them, where they constantly complain of lack of taxi service. That was, I believe, one of the reasons that the board decided to open the region for all the taxi companies. So there is a better chance for people from Fort Erie, Grimsby, and so on to get taxi service the way they deserve it. From what we've seen for 1 year, since this thing was open, over a year, it didn't get any better the other way around. I was trying to warn everybody in the beginning that what's going to happen when the region is open is all the license plates that were issued for places that currently suffer from not providing a good taxi service, is what's going to happen is this plates will move to a more lucrative, in their mind, areas. And that's exactly what happened. As far as I know, there are 2 paratransits and number of regular cabs in Fort Erie. Why are these people calling Niagara Falls Taxi to service them? After they called other taxi providers, they had to wait for more than 45, 50 minutes, so they decided to call us. That's not right. Why is the region open and people still don't have taxi service there? There are plates from Fort Erie that never stepped in Fort Erie. They work in St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, or someplace else. The whole idea of having taxi plates issued for a different municipality is somebody anticipated what the need of number of taxis will be for this municipality, and that's how these plates were issued. If Fort Erie needed 13 plates were issued for Fort Erie. How many of these 13 plates are working in Fort Erie now? At any time, I bet you there is not even a taxi in Fort Erie. Where are those taxis? You open the door for them to go to St. Catharines and Niagara Falls, and that's where they are. I encourage the board.
I got about another minute left, so if you could.
I encourage the board to look at this issue. It is becoming a serious issue. We get flooded with taxis from Welland, St. Catharines, Grimsby, Fort Erie, over here in Niagara Falls. There is not enough work for us here. Why are these people coming here? Our drivers are waiting sometimes an hour between jobs. We don't go to other municipalities. We stick to Niagara Falls because we value our customers. We want to be here for our customers. We don't want to go and compete with somebody else in St. Catharines or Fort Erie. You cannot provide good taxi service that way. One thing that was mentioned to me so many times is taxis that come from other municipalities are charging flat rates in Niagara Falls. They don't know the city. They don't want to use their meters. They're just charging $20 from the bus terminal to Casino Niagara because it's so easy. They don't care about the people that are coming here. They come, they make their money, and they run away. Okay. We're the ones that are here to stay. We are the ones that nobody ever complained that there is a flat rate or unfair service provided by Niagara Falls Taxi to our customers.
Okay, I have to interrupt you now. So you got a final line or something?
Opening the quarter, somebody mentioned that you might issue more plates. Be very careful with this. The taxi industry is in distress, okay? Because of Uber. We're suffering. We're not making enough money. Our drivers are working hard.
I'm sorry, sir. I have to stop. I get your point.
Thank you.
We all get your point on that. So, Woody, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. You made it points very clear.
Anybody from the board? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks for
your time.
appreciate
it. Thank you. Deb, next one, please.
The final speaker is Brandy Gray, Loyal Transportation.
Hello, good morning, thank you. My name is Brandy Gray, representing Loyal Transportation. I just wanted to comment quickly on a couple of things that are being proposed right now for TNC companies. The driver's license, or TNC license, similar to that of a taxi license, where the driver would come to the NRP headquarters or wherever you get licensed, for them to be seen at a regular quarterly amount to do current and ongoing criminal record checks and the vulnerable sector check. We agree that this is a great idea for small businesses because we may not have the amount of money that Uber does to have a private place for all of this information to be stored safely and then transmitted to you, as well as we trust that you could probably do a better job at checking the backgrounds and continuously updating those records or updating us with changes that may happen. And then the second point that I wanted to make was about the change for the cost for the TNC license, the company's license. Originally, there was a mention that up to 24 could be about $1,000, and then now it seems like it's changed from 1 to 100 vehicles are going to be $5,000 as the minimum. So I just wanted to mention that for smaller businesses to be able to become a TNC company and operate legally and follow the guidelines, that cost may not be affordable if they're starting out with, say, 1 to 24 drivers. Perhaps there could be a smaller one for smaller businesses that was similar to the original 1,000, and then 25 drivers to 100 could have a cost different to that. And then lastly, there was a lot of things that I agree with, that I've heard from taxi, that I've heard from all the different people that have come up and spoke today about the safety of the citizens and insurance. Insurance is the biggest problem right now because of Uber. There's been a lot of weariness in anyone promoting a business or insuring a business like a TNC. So to abide by the bylaw, you have to have a certain amount of insurance, not only for the company, but per driver. When you go to get rideshare insurance, they do not ask which company you work for. There's no option other than Uber. So the insurance, perhaps to solve some of the problems with that commercial insurance when they come and take somebody on the side, should maybe be provided for each individual driver rather than by the company, and the driver then is covered at all times with a commercial type of insurance. The hurdle still is having companies willing to do this, because right now no one is willing to insure another TNC sort of like Uber, because they don't want the danger of the sexual assaults and all the other, or you have to operate for a long period of time illegally before they feel like they will insure you. So I just wanted to make sure that I brought up those 3 points, that for small businesses, the amount of $15 per quarter and to be coming to the NRP is a great idea. We are completely in support, and that maybe there should be a smaller amount for the licensing to start, and then, of course, the rest is fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandy. Woody, do you have any questions?
Brandy, have you been in touch with insurance companies to find out how?
Yes, for over a year.
And
I actually brought with me an email from the last person who stated, if you don't mind, can I run and grab it, just so I verbatim. So I'm just going to mention the parts that were the most important. Aviva has reviewed your account, and due to the class of business rideshare and the fact that the company is new, they are unable to provide a quote for you. We do have other people and other companies that are still, okay, we'll think about it, and we have other companies that are willing to do something that almost appeases the bylaw with the fact of the third party, but it's still that rideshare commercial part where the moment the customer is in the car until they leave, that sort of thing won't be covered by anyone, because insurance companies, they will not insure anyone except for Uber. And I don't know the reason or the deal that they have to do that, or what we have to do to also get in the door, but that seems to be the largest problem right now.
Have you gone to Intact? I think that's who Uber.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Intact, even on their website, stated that they would, for Uber and other rideshare insurance companies, or sorry, other rideshare companies, when we called them to ask, hey, can I get, insurance so that I can put it on for the company Loyal, and it would, let them know when I expire, et cetera, et cetera. They said to us, it's called Uber insurance, and we can only insure Uber. So that's been the biggest hurdle for us, is finding an insurance, and we think that it should be allowed, commercial insurance at all times on the driver, not necessarily the company. So in the cases where somebody took a ride because they pulled up to a place they didn't belong, they're still covered, and the public is still safe.
Detective Sergeant LeBon, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Ganzel, you have one?
Thank you. Just to qualify, because I missed it when I was trying to look up something here. You represent?
Loyal Transportation.
Which is a normal taxi type service.
We were hoping and have applied back in July, I believe it was, to be a TNC company here.
So you would end up being a TNC specifically within the Niagara region. That's your intent.
The Niagara region, yes.
And it's called Royal?
Loyal, Loyal.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? No? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. So that is all the names that Deb has on her list for people to speak. And I know there's some tow operators here too. Is there anyone else that didn't feel that they should come up, because we've only heard from the taxi industry? We're good? Okay, so any additional submissions will also be accepted by the board and should be made in writing and filed with the board office no later than November 30th. You have Donna's still at the back? No, she's not. So it's psb@niagarapolice.ca, but you know how to get a hold of us because you're here. So if you have any submissions, please send it in, especially if there's any comments that have been made here that you disagree with, and that. I have no problem with that. Deb, is that, we're wrapped up on this? So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah. Is it a long question? Because I'll bring you up here. Go ahead. You'll be the final person, sir. And your name and company, please?
My name is Sayed, and I am from Brockview Taxi in St. Catharines.
Okay.
And my question is, when was the last time the quota was open for taxis in St. Catharines?
And if Woody has an answer or the detective sergeant has an answer, fine. If not, we'll get it back to you. Go ahead.
I don't know, long time, but I don't know.
So it's been years?
Yeah, we can find out, but.
Detective Sergeant?
Yeah,
long time.
I have no information on it. It was long before my time.
So Deb will get your name and number, and we will get back to you on that.
Okay,
But do you have a further question to that or a comment as a
well,
result?
my concern is that why the open hasn't been open for so many years. The last time I heard it was back in the 80s,
okay.
Over 30 years ago. And everybody is going against it. They're saying we have enough taxis while we have over 200 Uber drivers working in the region. And people are still making money.
Okay, so please send a submission to Deb or an email to Deb with what your comments are, but we will get back to you if Deb can get do you have his name and number on the sheet? Okay, good.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.